are going to start with chapter 1, nutrition in plants. So students, as we all know that all the living organisms have some basic characteristics, like they need water, they need food, air, they do lot of life processes like respiration, excretion, reproduction. Other than this, they age and they die. So all these life processes and these activities qualify them to a part of living world. Other than this, living beings also do lot of physical activities like running, jumping, walking, sleeping, eating. So for all these life processes, metabolic activities and physical activities, they need a lot of energy. So from where they will get all these energy? They can get it from the food and proper nutrition. So students, think about what would happen if living organism has to live without food for a day or a week or for a 15 days. So what would happen? They won't be able to survive on this earth. So on the base for the survival of on this earth, they need energy and they will get it from the food and proper nutrition. So what is this nutrition? So students, nutrition is the intake of food and its utilization by the body. We can say that our food and nutrients are important and its utilization is also very important by the body. So what are these nutrients? So these nutrients gives us energy for growth, for development, for repairment of the body, for other metabolic activities and for the different physical activities. There are some components in nutrients which are very much essential for our body. They protect us from various diseases also. So what are these nutrients? So students, you must have studied in your previous classes. These are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins and other mineral substances. So these components of nutrients like carbohydrates and fats provides us energy, whereas protein is very much important for the development and growth of the body, and other vitamins and minerals, they protect us from the various diseases. So all these nutrients are important for our body for all these metabolic activities and physical activities. Students, as we know that all living organisms require food, and who makes the food for us? Like plants, we all know that plants can make their own food for themselves, but animals and other human beings cannot. They directly or indirectly depend on the food. Either they has to eat plant or either they have to eat animals that have eaten that plant. So we can say that they are either directly or indirectly dependent on the plants only. So students, because of that only, animals has to move a lot so that they can fulfill their requirement of food. They search for the food. So what we can say, we can classify the mode of nutrition into two types because of all these: autotrophic mode of nutrition and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So if I talk about the autotrophic mode of nutrition, so it in itself made up of two words, auto plus trophic. So auto means self and trophic means nourishment. So if we talk about the plants or an organism who makes its own food for themselves for their nourishment, so they comes in the category of autotrophic mode of nutrition, like various plants and algae comes in this category. Whereas heterotrophic mode of nutrition, so hetero and trophic is also made up of two words. Hetero means different and trophic means nourishment. So the organisms who takes its food or nourishment from other sources are called the heterotrophic, and their mode of nutrition is a heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So what we can say that plants who makes its own food are called the producers, whereas heterotrophic mode of nutrition or heterotrophs comes in the category of consumers. So students, as in this chapter we are studying about the mode of nutrition in plants. So as earlier we have discussed that plants are the only organism that can prepare their own food for themselves by the raw materials present in their surrounding like water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight. So now question arises, where the food factories of plants located? Where food is whether the food is transported to leaves or not, and how they draw their raw materials from the surroundings. How do they transport them to food factories of the plants? So students, let us discuss about the process of photosynthesis, that is a food making process in plants. So students, what we can say that leaves are the food factories of the plants. Synthesis of food in plants occurs in only leaves. So we can also say that these are the kitchen of the plants. How? As if you go to your home, where do you get your food? Inside the kitchen only. So here leaves are also a kind of kitchen for the plant. Now all the raw materials must be reached there like carbon dioxide, water and minerals. So students, if we talk about the water and minerals, so it is present in the soil, and roots of the plant absorb the water and minerals from the soil and it is reaches to the plant. Now if we talk about the carbon dioxide, so it is taken from the air through the tiny pores that are present underside the leaves, and these tiny pores are called the stomata, and these stomata are surrounded by a guard cells. So as students, here I have used the word cell. So what is cell? Now if we talk about the cell, so cell is as you know that a building is made up of bricks. So as is our body is made up of cells. We can say that cell is the unit of life, and it is a we can see the cells through the help of microscope. As cell makes the tissues makes the organ, and these organs makes the body. Now what is this cell and what is its structure? So these cells are surrounded by a thin membrane that is called the cell membrane, and there is a dense nucleus present inside the cell. This is called the nucleus, and a jelly like structure surrounded this nucleus is called the cytoplasm. So this students, this is the structure of cells. So our body is made up of only cells. Now as we have discussed that water and minerals are absorbed by the root of the plants. So how would they reach there? So students, if you talk about that branches, so there are pipe-like structure present throughout the stem and leaves. These structures helps in the transportation of water and minerals to the plants. It is throughout the plant like branches, leaves and stems. So because of that water and minerals transported to the plants. Now if we talk about the process of photosynthesis, so the leaves, there are chlorophyll present in the leaves which captures the solar energy and changes it into a solar energy. It captures the solar energy and changes it into a chemical energy. Now with the help of this chemical energy, plants synthesize its own food in the form of carbohydrate and releases oxygen with the help of raw materials like carbon dioxide and water. So students, what we have seen that leaves captures the solar energy for the process of photosynthesis. So because of that only we say that this process is called the photosynthesis. Students, this is a unique process. Here sun energy is captured to form the food. Now what we have seen, we need chlorophyll, sunlight, raw materials, various like carbon dioxide and water for the process of photosynthesis. And what we have seen, student, that sun is the ultimate source of energy on this earth, and we cannot live without the process of photosynthesis. Even we cannot imagine our life on this earth by the process of photosynthesis. As earlier we have discussed that only plants can make its own food, but animals and other human beings cannot. So they are dependent on the plants for the food and their other nutrient requirements. So students, here, other than this, photosynthesis also releases a life supporting gas, oxygen, which is also essential for the survival of living beings. So this was all about the process of photosynthesis. So if we can say that in the absence of process of photosynthesis, there would be no life. So what is the equation of the process of photosynthesis? So here, carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll forms the carbohydrate and oxygen. So students, if you see a section through a leaf, we can see that chlorophyll is present in the upper part of the leaves, and their underside of the leaves, a tiny pores present are called the stomata, and they are surrounded by a guard cells. So students, we have seen that during this process of the photosynthesis, oxygen is released, whereas the carbohydrates ultimately get converted into a starch. So the presence of starch in leaves indicates the occurrence of photosynthesis. The starch is also a carbohydrate. Now students, as we have seen that the process of photosynthesis, sunlight is very important, and food which is made in the form of carbohydrate get converted into a starch. So let us do one activity to understand this process. What do you need? You need 2 potted plants of the same quality, same plant you need. So just write down pot A and pot B. Now what you have to do, just place one plant in the sunlight and another plant in a dark room for 2 or 3 days. Now take the leaves from both the potted plants. Now what you have to do, you have to do the iodine test on both the leaves. So just take some dilute solution of iodine solution like 5 to 10 drops and add it on both the leaves. So what you will observe, the leaves which was present in a dark for 2 or 3 days, that doesn't give the starch test, whereas the leaves which was present in the sunlight gives the starch test. It's turned into a blue-black color. So what does it show? It shows that starch is present in the form of food in the leaves, and we need sunlight for the process of photosynthesis. Students, besides leaves, there are other parts of the plants like green branches, green leaves also do the process of photosynthesis. How? As you go to a desert area, so there is environment is very hot. So because of that, leaves are modified into a certain structure that they changes into a needle or spine like, so that loss of transpiration cannot take place. These modification reduces the process of transpiration, that is a loss of water. So here stems do the process of photosynthesis. So it was all about the process of photosynthesis. So students, other than this, if you see in your surroundings, you can see that green leaves are only of, most of the leaves are of green colored, but there are many leaves which show some spots like maroon, brown or green color or red colors. So how do these plants do the process of photosynthesis? So students, what happened in this case, there are also chlorophyll present in the leaves, but they are masked by these colors like red, yellow and brown. So here also a process of photosynthesis takes place. Other than this, you often see slimy green patches in ponds or in other stagnant water bodies. So what are these? These generally formed by the growth of organisms that is called the algae. So why they are called green color? Because of chlorophyll present in these plants. So students, it was all about the process of photosynthesis which takes place in the plants. So students, here we have seen the process of photosynthesis. What we have seen that plants need some raw materials like carbon dioxide and water for the synthesis of carbohydrate, and during this process they releases the oxygen. Now next, synthesis of plant food other than the carbohydrates. So students, as we know that in the process of photosynthesis, the carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. Like we know that plants synthesize its food in the form of carbohydrates. So, and if we talk about the nutrients, so we need protein, carbohydrate, fats and vitamins and minerals. So plants also need proteins for the process of growth. So as we have discussed that plants absorb carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis. As students, there is a nitrogen present in the atmosphere in an abundance quantity, but plants cannot absorb that nitrogen. So what happens here? As if we talk about the symbiotic relationship, so what happens? There is some bacteria present in the soil which convert that gaseous nitrogen into a soluble form and release it into the soil. So these soluble forms are absorbed by the plants along with the water and other minerals. Other than this, you might have seen that farmers and gardeners also use some manures and fertilizers to the soil. So why do they do this? Because of replenishment of these nutrients or nitrogen for the plant's requirement. So students, here we have seen other than carbohydrates, plants also need the nitrogen for the protein requirement for its growth. So it takes in the form of, as there are in soil present some bacteria which absorbs the nitrogen and changes into a nitrogenous compound so that plant can take. Other than this, farmers, gardeners, they add some manures and fertilizer to the soil. So it was all about the synthesis of other than carbohydrate. Here we have seen that some bacteria absorbs the nitrogen from the atmosphere. Now the next is heterotrophic mode of nutrition in plants. So students, as here we have talked about the autotrophic mode of nutrition, where we have seen that plants make its own food by the process of photosynthesis by the raw material like carbon dioxide and water and in the sunlight. Now students, heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So as earlier we have discussed that many animals, humans cannot make their own food, so they are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants or the producers. So students, there are many plants who lack chlorophyll. So because of that, they cannot synthesize their own food. So how do they survive? And from where do they derive their nutrition? Like yeast, mushrooms, molds. These are some plants who they lack chlorophyll and they cannot make their own food. So if we talk about the heterotrophic mode of nutrition in plants, it can be of saprotrophic mode of nutrition, parasitic mode of nutrition and symbiotic mode of nutrition, and there are some plants like insectivorous plants. So students, let us discuss about the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. So what happens in this mode of nutrition? So here organisms feed on dead and decaying organic matter. That's why they are called as saprotrophs, saprophytes, or there are some terms also used, that is a saprobionts. So what they do? They secrete the digestive juices on dead and organic matter, and on that, or what happened at that time, and then it is so they digested and converted into a soluble form, and these soluble forms are the end products are digested by these saprophytes or saprobionts. So students, let us start with the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. So students, there are many organisms who feed on dead and decaying matter, and that's why they are called the saprotrophes, or sometimes there are some terms used like saprophytes or saprobionts. So what they do? They secrete digestive juices on the dead and organic matter, and it is then digested and converted into a soluble forms, and these soluble forms or end product of digested absorbed by these saprotrophes or saprobionts. So students, what we can say, the mode of nutrition in which organisms derives its food from the dead and organic matter are called the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. So what happens? Students, you must have seen in a rainy season that there are many articles like leather and wood, and if you left over some food for a long time, what happens? You can see some small patches or growth. So these are the mold. So what happens? These molds, so these organisms stays in air, and when they get the favorable conditions like wet and warm and humid conditions, so they land on that proper food and on a proper articles and start germinating on this, and through which they take their nutrition. So this kind of nutrition is called the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. So if you want to observe this kind of growth, we can perform one activity. For this, you need a piece of bread. So what you have to do, just put some water on it and place it at some moistened place for 3 or 4 days. Now what you will observe, you can see there are some small patchy growth on that. So this growth is because of that saprobionts in the bread mold. So students, it was all about the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. Now parasitic mode of nutrition. So what happens here? The organism live on or inside the living organisms. So these living organisms are called the host, and they derive its food or nutrients from them by this mode of nutrition. So the mode of nutrition through which organisms derive its nutrition and food from the host is called the parasitic mode of nutrition. In this parasite association, parasites or parasitic association, parasites always benefited, whereas the host is harmed. For example, you can take the example of cuscuta. So what happens there? You can see sometimes a yellow tubular structure that twinnings around the tree. So these yellow tubular structure is called the umber-veil or cuscuta, and they climb on the tree, and they are called the parasites, as they live on these living organisms like plant and derive its nutrients from there. So the where they climb is called the host. So this association is called the parasitic mode of nutrition, where the organism derives its food from the host cell, and where what we have seen that host always benefited, whereas the organism always get harmed. Now it was all about the parasitic mode of nutrition. Now insectivorous plants. So students, these plants are also called the carnivorous plants, as they capture animals or small insects for their food. As you know students, that they have a green structure so that they can make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. But where these plants grow, that soil is deficient in nitrogen. So because of that, they take their nitrogenous substance from these insects. So what happens there? The leaves of these plants are modified in some structure, and they secrete the juices, and when insects come to these juices, they get digested the insect and complete their nitrogenous requirement from the insects. So because of that, we can also say that they are partially heterotrophic. As we can take the example of pitcher plant. So what happens there? Here leaves is modified into a form of pitch, and there are some small hair grow inside that pitch, and they secrete some juices, and on the apex of that leaves there is a closed lid like structure that sometimes opens and closes. So what happens? Insects come to take the juices, and when they land on the plant, this lid closes and the insect drawn into that pitch, and it is digested by the plants. Same as we can take also the example of sundew. What happens there? Here they also secrete the juices and it glitters in the presence of sunlight. So when the insect get attracted and reaches there, it just stick with the insect and they digest the insect. So students, it was all about the insectivorous plants. That this kind of mode of nutrition is also called a partial heterotrophic mode of nutrition, where plants make its own food, but as they grow in a soil that is deficient in nitrogen, so because of that it digests these insects to derive its nitrogen deficiency. Now, symbiotic relationship. So students, the organisms live in close relationship with each other and being of mutual benefit are called the symbiosis. Sym means together and bio means life. So they live their life together. If we take the example of rhizobium bacteria. So students, there are leguminous plants. So what happens? These rhizobium bacteria lives in the root nodules of leguminous plant. And as we all know that plants cannot absorb nitrogen directly from the atmosphere, so they absorb the nitrogen from the atmosphere and changes into a nitrogenous compound, and this compound is, or this nitrogen is synthesized for the protein, as plants takes the advantage of this bacteria, whereas this bacteria cannot make its own food, so it's derive its food from the leguminous plant. So this kind of relationship is called the symbiotic relationship, and where farmers gets the benefit, so that they do not need to add nitrogen in leguminous plants. So students, here we have discussed about the heterotrophic mode of nutrition in plants, the plants who lacks chlorophyll. So we have discussed about the saprotrophic mode of nutrition, insectivorous plants, parasitic mode of nutrition, and other than that a symbiotic relationship. Now next topic, how nutrients are replenished in the soil. So students, as you must have seen many times, like farmers, gardeners, or if you can see in your home, that sometimes you add some manures or fertilizers to the plants. So why do we do all these things? Why do we add manures and fertilizers to the plants? Why? Because these manures and fertilizers are rich in nutrients, and plants derive these nutrients for their growth, healthy growth and development. So as we can say that these nutrients and manures are important to add to a time, need to add it towards some time in the plant, so that plants can grow in a healthy way. As students, we all know that plants absorb nutrients from the soil, and at the time of harvesting, sometimes what farmers do, they grow the plants again and again. So because of that, soil becomes deficient in these nutrients. So these manures and fertilizers, like they are rich in nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. So these nutrients gives these manures and fertilizers gives nutrients to the soil, and they replenish the soil. Other than this, if we talk about that symbiotic relationship for the leguminous plants, so there are bacteria, that is a rhizobium bacteria, which lives in the root nodules of the leguminous plant, and it absorbs the nitrogen from the atmosphere and changes it into a soluble nitrogenous compound. And these compound is taken by the leguminous plants. Like these leguminous plants can be of moong, dal, moong, tuar, chana and other lentils. So how farmers get this benefit because of these leguminous plants? So they need not to add nitrogen into these leguminous plants, and plants gets its nitrogen through this rhizobium bacteria, and they live in a symbiotic relationship. So because of that, nutrients are replenished in the soil, can be of manure and fertilizer, or can be this symbiotic relationship. So students, it was all about the nutrition in plants. So students, let us take a quick revision of this chapter. So students, as earlier what we have discussed, that all the living organisms have some common characteristics, like many life processes like nutrition, digestion, respiration, excretion and reproduction. Other than this, we need water, food, air. So for all, and other than this, we do lot of physical activities like running, jumping, walking. So for all these, we need food and we need energy. So how do we get it? From the proper nutrition. So what we have discussed, that nutrition is the process of intake of food or nutrients and its utilization by the body. And what are those nutrients? So those are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins and minerals.
No more spending your energy and money on coaching classes, or missing classes for rain, for rally and any other nonsense. Subjects covered by multiple teachers with repeat telecasts. Doubts, concepts, applications, no problem. All explained through great and significant animation. So sit back comfortably in your home and watch Study Spectrum TV channel.
So students, what we have seen, that plants can make their own food, but whereas animals and human beings cannot make their own food. So they are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants. So because of that, we can divide the mode of nutrition or classify into two categories: autotrophic mode of nutrition and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So what happens in autotrophic mode of nutrition? Here plants make its own food for themselves. So, and in heterotrophic nutrition, the organisms and human beings or plants who lack chlorophyll, they take it from the plants like human beings, animals, and there are some plants like molds, yeast comes in this category. Other than this, so what was that autotrophic mode of nutrition, where we have seen that plants make its own food by the raw material like carbon dioxide and water, and the chlorophyll present in the leaves traps the solar energy and changes it into a chemical energy, and they synthesize the food in the form of carbohydrate that gets converted into a starch and releases a oxygen. So it was a process of photosynthesis. So why do we say that this is the process of photosynthesis? Because plants traps the solar energy. That's why this process is called the photosynthesis. Whereas we have seen that plants need carbon dioxide and other water and minerals. So this must reach to the plants. And where is that factory? So leaves are the factories of the food factories of the plants, and all the materials should reach there like carbon dioxide, water and minerals. So where we have seen that on the underside of leaves there are tiny pores present are called the stomata. So these absorbs the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Other than this, root absorbs the water and minerals from the soil, and it is transported through the vessels. It's a pipe-like structure present throughout the plants, helps in the transportation of water and minerals to the leaves and other branches and stem of the plant. Here what we have seen, that chlorophyll present in the leaves captures the solar energy. So what we can say, that photosynthesis is important for the life. We cannot imagine our life without photosynthesis. Why? Because only plants can make its own food, and they releases an oxygen as a raw material that is important for the survival of a living organism. Other than this, we have also discussed about that some unlike plants makes only carbohydrate. So carbohydrate is made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. But we need proteins also, as we all know that nitrogen is present in our atmosphere in an abundance amount, but plant cannot absorb it. So there is a symbiotic relationship where rhizobium bacteria present in the soil, which absorbs the nitrogen from the atmosphere and changes it into a nitrogenous compound, and plants synthesize protein from this nitrogen and they take it along with the water. Other than this, students, we have also discussed about the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. What we have seen, that there are many plants who lacks chlorophyll. So because of absence of chlorophyll, plants cannot make their own food. So because of that, they are dependent on other plants. So we can also categorize these heterotrophic mode of nutrition into saprotrophic mode of nutrition, heterotrophic mode of insectivorous plants, parasitic mode of nutrition, and a symbiotic relationship. So what we have seen, in saprotrophic mode of nutrition, organism derives its food from the dead and decaying organic matters like bread, mold and other fungi. In parasitic mode of nutrition, like the plant parasite who lacks chlorophyll, twinning around the living organism like plant and derive its food or the nourishment from that living organism, that is called a host. So what we have seen, in this parasitic association, the parasite always benefited, whereas a host cell always get harmed because of this association. Other than this, we have also discussed about the insectivorous plants. So what we have seen, that these insectivorous plants are of green color, so they can do the process of photosynthesis. They can make their own food, but the organisms live, that area is deficient, that this plant where it's grow, that area, that soil is deficient in nitrogen. So here leaves are modified into some structure, so that what happens when our insects land on these kind of plant, they are drawn into the plant, and these plant get digested, these insects, and derive its nitrogen from that plant, as we have discussed about the pitcher plant and sundew. Then we have also discussed about the symbiotic relationship, where what happens here, rhizobium bacteria present in the root nodules of leguminous plants, and it absorbs the nitrogen from the atmosphere and changes it into a nitrogenous compound, and that nutrient is taken by the leguminous plant, whereas this bacteria cannot make its own food, so it derives its food from the leguminous plant. So it was all about the symbiotic relationship and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So students, here we have done with this chapter, nutrition in plants. Now let us start with the exercise of this chapter, nutrition in plants. So students, here our first question is, why do organisms need to take food? So students, as earlier we have discussed that living organisms have some common basic characteristics. They do lot of metabolism activities takes place, like respiration, digestion, reproduction, circulation, and other than this we need water, air, food. Other than this, living organisms lot of physical activities like running, jumping, walking. So for all these metabolic activities and physical activities, our body needs energy, and we get this energy from the food. Now next question, distinguish between a parasite and saprotroph. So students, if we talk about the parasite, so what is parasite? So here organism derive its food from living on the plant or inside the plant. So here we have discussed about, so the parasites derive its nutrients from the living organism, so that's why they are called the parasites, and the living organism is called the host. Here we have taken the example of cuscuta. So that tubular structure twinnings around the tree and derive its nutrition from the living tree. And what happens in this case, in this association, parasitic association, the parasite always get benefited, whereas host get the harm. What happens in saprotrophic mode of nutrition? Where what are those saprotrophs? So the organisms who derives its food from or nutrients from the dead and decaying organic matter are called the saprotrophs. Examples are bread mold and yeast. Now the next question, how would you test the presence of starch in leaves? So students, here as earlier we had discussed about the activity in which what we have taken a same plant, same kind of plant, two potted plants. So what we have done there, one plant like plant A we have kept in a dark room so that it cannot get any source of light, and plant B we have placed in a sunlight for 3 to 4 days. Then what you have to do, just take the leaves of both the plants and perform a iodine test. What you have to do, just take up 5 to 6 drops of iodine solution and put it into both the leaves. Why we are keeping this leaf into a dark room? So that in order to so that it can replace there are photosynthesis cannot takes place in this leaf, so that there cannot be a formation of carbohydrate. So what happens when we do this starch test? What we can observe? We can see that a plant A which was kept in a dark room will not give the starch test. It will not turn to a blue or black color, whereas the leaf from the plant B will give the starch test and it will be turned into a black and blue color. So it was all about the presence of starch in leaves. Now next question, give a brief description of the process of synthesis of food in plants. So students, what is that process? This is the process of photosynthesis. What happens there? Here plants make its own food by the process of photosynthesis, and they take their raw materials like carbon dioxide and water and minerals from their surroundings. So what happens here? The chlorophyll present in the leaves captures the sunlight and changes into a chemical energy, and this chemical energy synthesizes the food with the help of carbon dioxide and water and releases a carbohydrate and synthesize the food carbohydrate and releases the oxygen. So this process is called the photosynthesis, where all the raw materials should reach to the leaves, because leaves are the food factories of the plant. So water and minerals are absorbed by the root of the plant from the soil, and it is transported to the leaves, as there are vessels present in the leaves which helps in the process of transportation of water and minerals. Whereas carbon dioxide, so it is absorbed by the atmosphere, as on the underside of the leaves small stomata are small tiny pores are present, which are called the stomata, which helps in the absorption of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So it was all about the process of photosynthesis in the plants. Now the next question, fill in the blanks. Now the next question is fill in the blanks. So our first question is, green plants are called dash since they synthesize their own food. So students, green plants are called the autotrophs because they synthesize their own food. Now the next question is, the food synthesized by the plants is stored as dash. So it's stored as a starch. Now next, in photosynthesis, solar energy is captured by the pigment called, so that pigment is called the chlorophyll. Now the next question, during photosynthesis, plants take in dash and release dash. So the plants take in carbon dioxide and releases the oxygen. Now next question, name the following. So first one, a parasitic plant with yellow slender and tubular stem. So this plant is called the cuscuta or amar berry. The next, a plant that has both autotrophic and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So here students, we have discussed about the insectivorous plant, pitcher plant. So the plants, they make their own food, that's why they are called the heterotrophic, whereas they take their nitrogen from these insects, that's why they are called the insectivorous plants, and they come in the category of partial heterotrophic. The next question is, the pores through which leaves exchange gases. So the answer is stomata. Now the next, pick the correct answer. Question A, amar bale is an example of. So here the options are autotroph, parasite, saprotroph and host. So amar bale is an example of parasite. Now the next question is, the plant which traps and feeds on insects is. So here options are cuscuta, China rose, pitcher plant and rose. So the option is pitcher plant. Now the next question, match the items given in column 1 with those in column 2. So column 1 is chlorophyll, nitrogen, amar bale, animals and insects. Now in column 2, it's bacteria, heterotrophs, pitcher plant, leaf and parasite. So let us start with the column A, chlorophyll. So students, chlorophyll is present in a leaf. So here the answer will be leaf. Now nitrogen, bacteria, amar bale, parasite, animals, heterotrophs, insects, pitcher plant. Now the next question, mark T if the statement is true, F it is a false. So the first is, carbon dioxide is released during photosynthesis. No, this is false. Oxygen is released by the process of photosynthesis. Now next question, plants which synthesize their food themselves are called saprotrophs. So here false. The answer will be autotrophs. Now the next question, the product of photosynthesis is not a protein. It's true. The product of photosynthesis is a carbohydrate. Now the next question, solar energy is converted into a chemical energy during photosynthesis. So students, it is true. Now the next question, choose the correct option from the following. So first question, which part of the plant takes in carbon dioxide from the air for photosynthesis? Here options are root hair, stomata, leaf veins and sepals. So the answer will be second option, stomata. Now the next question, choose the correct option from the following. Here the question is, plants take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere mainly through their, so the options are roots, stem, flowers, leaves. So the option will be the last 4 leaves. So students, it was all about the exercise of nutrition in plants. So students, thank you for watching the Study Spectrum TV channel, and we are done with the lesson Nutrition in Plants. I hope you understood this lesson clearly. Thank you.